Well, prynawn da, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the third session of Amgueddfa Experts, the latest module of the E-xpanding Horizons project with us at e-sgol. These sessions are especially for you, Year 5 and 6 learners. It's great to have you a part of these sessions. I'm certainly looking forward to learning more. I'm Sue Richards and I work for e-sgol. I have the pleasure of introducing a very important person to you today, Seren Fenolay from Amgueddfa Cymru, who will be guiding us through this session. Therefore, get your laptops and your tablets ready to join in the Kahoot in the middle of the session this time, whilst everyone gets their devices ready. And before Sarah gets started, a few things to note. The cameras, microphones and chats are off on your side for these sessions and it will be recorded. This is an opportunity for you to listen carefully, answer the quiz questions as we go along. So welcome, Sarah, and we are very grateful to you for joining us and we're really looking forward to learning more. So off we go. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello everyone, good afternoon. Really nice to be talking to you today. So like Siwan said, my name is Seren and I work for National Museums Wales. I'm talking to you today from St Fagans. And we're going to be learning a little bit about the history of protest and activism. So I'll just make sure that this is all, can you see that clearly? Great, okay. So this session is called Hawlio Heddwch, which is a Welsh term that in English means something along the lines of claiming peace. And we're going to have a look back today at peace, protest and activism in Wales through history. What we're going to do, or what I'd like you to do, today is to make an action plan, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that now. But throughout all of time, people of Wales have stood up for their rights, for their country, for their language and for their people. We're very proud people here in Wales, and today we're going to look at some of the key questions about activism and protest, and we're going to learn a little bit more about the rich history of activism and protest in Wales along the way. Okay, so you're going to create action plans, or we're going to look at how you would create an action plan and what your rights are within that in terms of protest and activism. So we've split this into 4 key questions. What do we want to achieve with your cause? Who can help or support us? How will we communicate these aims, and what actions are we going to take? Now, what cause you choose to stand for is entirely up to you. We might be looking at a really broad cause, like, you know, global peace, or you might be looking at something really specific, a change you want to make in school, something you want banned from your school menu, a safe crossing to be put in place near your school, something more relevant to your community that you'd like to achieve. So we're going to have a look through each of these questions and look back at history through each section as well. And at the end of each question, there'll be a little quiz question to make sure that to keep you on your toes, make sure you've been listening. Okay, so Siwan, is there a cause that you'd like to stand for?
I was thinking about our small primary school here does not have a zebra crossing outside the school, and it's a very busy main road. So possibly a zebra crossing, or even traffic lights, you know, so that the pupils can cross the road safely when going to school.
Brilliant. I think that's an excellent cause to stand for, and hopefully we can help you along the way think about how you could achieve that. So the first question we're going to have a look at is, what do we want to achieve? And that's the first port of call when starting with any new cause, really, is thinking about what's your aim and what are you doing it for. So there's been a lot of really successful campaigns in Wales. The first one I'm going to talk to you about today is Cymdeithas yr Iaith. So this is a group of people who are standing for Welsh rights, and particularly rights around the Welsh language. Now, in the 90s, when I was young, these stickers were on pretty much every single road sign. Anything you saw out and about that didn't have Welsh and English on it, only the English, you would see these stickers. These days, luckily, we don't need to see so many because it's much more normal to see the Welsh and the English, and it's actually part of our laws. in Wales. And that's something that this community brought to fruition. So in the 1960s, they made their campaign for bilingual road signs. And although it took a long time to actually change every single one, this is something that has now happened. In the 1970s, they campaigned for the first Welsh language television, and this was the first time that there was any Welsh language television broadcast at all. And by the 1980s, they'd established S4C. In the 1990s, it had the Welsh Language Act, and as you go through all of this time, they've been achieving amazing things for us and for our language. So Cymdeithas yr Iaith are a huge success story in terms of peaceful and successful activism in Wales. Now, the second group we're going to look at is Greenham Common. So the Women's Peace Camp at Greenham Common made history nationally, but the reason it's relevant to Wales is that there was a group of women who marched from Cardiff all the way to Greenham in England. So this is over 110 miles, and it took them more than 10 days to walk the whole way. And what they were standing for is against nuclear weaponry. So they wanted to store nuclear bombs at Greenham within a small community. And these are bombs which were 15 times as powerful as those that destroyed Hiroshima. So these women fought very hard for peace and for safety. So there was an enormous march that went from Cardiff, but people stayed and camped and lived at Greenham Common over the course of a couple of years. I've spoken to several people who were children who stayed there with their mothers during this time, and they were successful. So they wanted by the end of 1983 to have these weapons stored there, and they managed to have that decision turned around. So another story of bravery and success by standing up for your rights. So Siwan, do you think you might be making a big campaign like that for your cause?
Well, not as big as that, possibly. Maybe
Okay.
a local one for the
Yes.
children and the community, really. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about those actions that they're taking as we go forward. Okay, so that's the end of the first question. So we're going to have a quick now go on the Kahoot. So if I just stop sharing.
There we are. It's come up. So if everyone can join using either the QR code or the email address and the game pin there, you can join. Oh, people are joining already. Brilliant. Well done. And we'll start in maybe 30 seconds, possibly. Right then. Okay, off we go then. Thank you. What's the first question? Which decade did Welsh language TV start? The 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, or the 1990s? What did Sarah say at the start of this session?
It's a tricky one. I mentioned two of these decades in relation to television, but when was the first Welsh television broadcast?
Let's see. Oh, well done. 62 of you got that right. 1970s was the correct answer. 1980s was involved there somewhere, wasn't it, Sarah?
Yes, so S4C was established in the 1980s, after the first successful television broadcast through the 70s. So da iawn pawb, good job.
Yeah, we'll see the scoreboard. Mia is out on top. Lovely. Diolch, Sarah. And we'll go back to the presentation now.
No problem. Okay, so the second question we're going to look at is who can help or support us. And having help and support for a cause is so important. And thinking about who you want representing your campaign or your cause can make a real difference to maybe how you're perceived. So it's something really important to think about. There's lots of different ways of showing that support and getting that support. So one example I wanted to show you that was very successful was from the Wildlife Trust, and this was the No New M4 hashtag. When there was proposed plans to build a length of the M4 through the Gwent Levels Wildlife Trust, Wildlife Sanctuary. So what they did here was extremely simple. They've put together a one-page logo and hashtag. They've sent it to their local celebrities and said, would you print this out and share a picture on social media holding it, or send us the picture and we'll share it from our social media. They've taken these printed leaflets to things like rugby matches, football games, and if they've seen anybody recognizable, they've said, can you hold this and we'll take a picture of you? Are you happy for us to use it? So, you know, getting someone to support you, you can do it without having to ask too much of them, and that makes them perhaps more likely to be involved. So this was one that was really successful, and they had hundreds of celebrities in the end sharing this hashtag and getting their message across. You also can do things to raise awareness of your course and get supporters. Things like concerts have been extremely successful for some of the larger campaigns that have happened in Wales. You might have heard of some along the lines of Live Aid and things like that. So, you know, it doesn't have to be quite on that scale again, but you want to think about ways that you can raise funds as well as find people to support you. And things like concerts could be good. Shiwan, who do you think you might ask to support your cause for your zebra crossing?
Well, obviously people in the school community do. So staff, governors, the pupils themselves, of course, parents, guardians, and then maybe the wider community, then on to the council and the local government, possibly. Yeah, a lot of people to think about and to get involved.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you can find any sort of local celebrity, or even your Aelod of Senedd, your you know, your
Local
member of
MP,
Senedd,
yeah.
local MPs, councillors, you know, anyone whose name holds a little bit of gravitas. Okay, so that's the end of question 2. So we're going to go for another quiz question now.
Right then. So this is a poll this time. Which celebrity would you like to support your campaign? So think about your campaign now. Would it be Dwayne Johnson, Millie Bobby Brown, Mr. Beast, or Billie Eilish?
No wrong answers here.
No, a mixture of people there who would be best to help your campaign.
I'm not sure you'd get any of these guys to stand up for your safe crossing. Shiwan, maybe?
No, I'm afraid not. Well, there we are. We've got a mixture of celebrities there, haven't we? No one is standing out. Mr. Beast, possibly.
Brill. Thank you, guys. Okay, so questions 3 and 4 are a little bit more in depth. Okay. So the next one I want you to think about is vital. And it's easy to overlook. The first thing we think about when we think about maybe standing up for a cause or having a protest is probably marching, making placards, all of those really important things. But actually putting a time and effort into how you want to communicate your aims is extremely valuable in how people will receive you and your cause. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about here is hashtags, the power of a hashtag. So some of you may remember parts of the Black Lives Matter movement that started in about 2020 and has been enormous. So this is a case where there was an instance in America where a black man was killed by American police. And what we think about here when we look at these hashtags is, would that news have spread globally, and particularly as quickly as it did, without the power of social media and without hashtags such as these? So when this went out and the hashtag blackout meant everybody posted a plain black square on their social media. Without that, would us here in Wales have heard about these kinds of causes? So hashtags are a really, really powerful way to get a message to spread quickly and to spread through communities. And, you know, in my hometown of Abergavenny, there was an enormous Black Lives Matter vigil during the lockdown. You know, it's very rare that something that happened in America would be reaching these kinds of Welsh communities. So, you know, having a think about that and how that's represented. Now, posters have always been a very powerful tool. You can also make flyers that you can leave hanging around, or maybe little zines, little magazines about your cause. This is nothing new, but the way that you use it can be really creative. So some of you may have heard of Extinction Rebellion, and they're known for making these really powerful posters with this stark imagery and not much information. And this is clever in some ways because, first of all, they're using an image to make you think about their cause, but also you're more likely to Google them if you don't know exactly what they are and you're not sure what this is. So what they've got on some of these posters is just their name, Extinction Rebellion. And these guys they're campaigning about the climate emergency. And so they're using things here, this sand saying that we're running out of time. And they do have some posters with more information, but there's lots of different ways you can use printed media to get your message across. But before that was something easy to achieve in Wales, often we used ballads and protest songs. So this is a ballad from 1795 about a person called Dick Sean Dafydd. So before there were newspapers and radios and social media, people would travel from village to village, from town to town, and they would sing these songs. They'd sing them in the pubs, they'd sing them in the village square, they would teach them to people in that village, and songs would spread. And that would also be a way of spreading ideas. So someone who felt very strongly about his Cymreictod, his Welshhood, his Welsh language, wrote a song about a man who moved to England and turned his back on his country and his language and began speaking English. And it was real slander. And this was shared widely and was a very, very common ballad sung all around Wales. And it did help to put that idea in people's minds that that was a really bad thing to do, to move away, to move into England, to not use your Welsh language. So you can be quite influential, even with just a ballad or a song. As printing became more widely available and cheaper, you then were able to print books, newspapers and flyers. So this is something you could definitely be doing for any cause, small or large. You could be making a little pamphlet and leaving it around. One of the most powerful things you can do for anything that is important to you is you can write a letter. It can be to your Member of Parliament, it could be to BBC or S4C, it could be to your local council, it might be to the Board of Governors at your school. Writing a formal letter is a really powerful skill, and it's a really good way of getting people to listen to your cause and to take it seriously. So don't ever forget that you are within your rights to write to your MP at any time. So that brings us to the end of question 3. And another quiz question.
There we are. So, which of these hashtags was not used in a protest movement? Hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag Me Too, hashtag Fake News, or hashtag No New M4. I think Sarah has mentioned all 3. So which one was not used?
So all of these are popular hashtags, but one of them is not related to protest.
There we are. Yes. Hashtag Fake News was the correct answer.
Brilliant. Yes, so they're all quite famous hashtags, and if you want to look any of the others up in the classroom, you can. So well done, really good going, guys. So question 4 is the longest one, and probably the most exciting, the one that you really think about, well, the one that you're maybe most excited to do if you are going to take action for a cause. And that's what actions you're going to take and what you're actually going to do. What's really important if you are campaigning for a cause is that you don't jump into this section. You don't jump into action. You think about your cause, you think about fundraising, you think about what you need to do and how you're communicating first, and that's what gives your actions power. So when we think about actions, probably the most widespread one is petitions. So we sign petitions all the time. These days we sign petitions via email. And it's very easy to send a petition out to enormous groups of people, thousands of people online, and you type in your email address and you say, yes, I stand for this. And Welsh Government or national government, if they ask for up to a certain amount of signatures, and if you get more than, for example, 50,000 signatures, it will go to your local council. If it then gets 100,000 signatures, it might get passed up. So it's quietly powerful to sign a petition. Now, these women here are so important to the history of Wales. This is Annie Hughes-Griffiths holding this book here, and she's the chair of the Welsh League of Nations. And what these women did is they started the Welsh Women's Peace Petition in 1923. So in 1923, things were very different. And what they did was go knocking door to door all around Wales, collecting written signatures from other women in Wales who also wanted to support peace. And what they wanted was for America to join the League of Nations, and they believed that this would stop any more world wars happening. So this is not long after the end of the First World War. And obviously we know that if their aim was to stop another world war, then no, they weren't successful. There was another world war. But what they were successful in was spreading the message of their cause, spreading a message of peace, and in completing this amazing petition. So this petition was on vellum, which is like a type of leather almost, and they collected 390,000 signatures, almost 400,000 signatures in ink, and the petition was 7 miles long by the time they had finished. So they took this 7 miles of leather in a chest and they took it all the way to the White House by hand, these 4 women from Wales, and they delivered it to the president. And this petition was then held at the Smithsonian, which is the National Museum of America, for 100 years. And in 2023, it came back to us and it was on display here at St. Fagans. So if you look up, if you're interested in looking into this bit further in school, you can look up the Welsh Centre for International Affairs or the Temple of Peace, and they have links to a digitised version of their petition, and you can look up your family name or your address to see if it was signed. So petitions, very powerful, maybe not the most fun one that we think about when we think about our actions, but extremely powerful nonetheless. The second one is marching, and this is probably the most obvious one we think about if we're thinking about doing standing up for a cause. So there's been several very famous marches in Wales. Of course, the miners' strikes in the South Wales coalfield, also for slate in the north of Wales, had several enormous marches. And as long as you are peaceful, this is something that you are within your rights to do. If you need a road closed, you have to inform the police. But other than that, this is something that you are within your rights to do. So we're going to show a video now. But due to there being a couple of issues with my sound, if you just bear with me a second, my colleague's going to share it. Can you hear that, Siwan? No. Okay.
No.
Oh, that's a shame. Don't worry. I'll find a way to send this maybe through Siwan that can come to your classrooms. But it's, the imagery still is interesting to look at here. So what we're looking at here is the residents of Capel Celyn when it was proposed that their village would be flooded to make a reservoir for drinking water for the city of Liverpool. So this was a march that happened against that. And I'm sure we've all heard of Tryweryn. And it's something that was happening in Wales in the 1960s. So marches, no matter how peaceful you intend them to be, often end up less peaceful when you have a huge group of people together. This can happen. And if there's a member or members of a group who go against your peaceful nature, that can really disrupt things. So that's why all of the work you put in ahead of your march is really important. So just a little bit of an overview there. If we come back into here. So the women's suffrage movement did many marches in Wales and across the UK. So this is a really powerful moment in Welsh history. You can see them here outside the town hall. Siwan, do you know what the women's suffrage movement were campaigning for? What did they want?
Oh, you've put me on the spot now. I don't think I can remember.
Oh, that's okay. So these women wanted to vote. So this was at a time when only men were allowed to vote. And at first, the only women allowed to vote were women who were married and owned land or property. And obviously, thank goodness, now we are all able to vote. And that's thanks to these women. Now, these women took some quite extreme approaches to activism that we would not recommend, such as hunger strike. So many of these women starved themselves until they were put in hospital and tube fed. Some women chained themselves to gates. They took really drastic action. But there are many famous Welsh women who were involved in the women's suffrage movement. And they did some excellent marches. Now, boycott is a word that we've heard a fair bit recently. Lots of people decide to boycott an organisation for all kinds of reasons. Lots of people in the present day boycott Amazon, for example, because they don't agree with how they run as a company, how they treat their staff and that sort of thing. There's all kinds of reasons that you might boycott something. So here we're looking at the apartheid and saying we're not going to buy any goods coming from South Africa due to issues that were happening in South Africa at the time. So the point of a boycott is to stop, whether it's money or whatever it is that a company, a person, an organization that you don't agree with, you're trying to stop the flow of their business by not engaging with it. And the more people that can do that, the more powerful it can be. So if there was one shop in town that you didn't agree with something, you might say to your entire community, right, none of us is going to shop there. There have been ones to do with petrol. There was one petrol company that were really expensive. People decided en masse across the UK not to buy their petrol from them until they were making so little money they had no choice but to lower their costs. So boycott can be really powerful on a large scale, but it's slightly more complex and can be difficult. A difficult one to do. So we looked at those posters earlier from Extinction Rebellion. This is an example of Extinction Rebellion doing their thing. And what we're talking about here is civil disobedience. So these guys, they aren't marching as such. They're not exactly being obedient to the law either, but what they are being is civil. They're breaking the law in a civil way. They informed the police of what they were going to do. They are not shouting or being threatening. There's no violence of any kind. But parking a boat in the middle of the busiest road in Wales is not exactly obedient to the law, but they need to get their message across, they feel, for their cause. Their cause, again, is the climate emergency. So the power of this is that it might make some people think, that's amazing what they're doing, I want to join their cause. It might make some people think, I'm so angry that they're doing this, they've stopped the flow of my day, I've had to go all around Cardiff to get around this blockage. And they might be angry with them about that, but they've still then had to look into and are discussing their cause. So you're making an impact here, and suddenly you're on the news and on the radio, huge disruption in Cardiff, traffic jams everywhere, and everybody knows why. And suddenly they're looking into you and your cause, and maybe they're thinking about climate change a little bit more after it's affected their life. Extinction Rebellion said about this, if this is disrupting your life and your day, what do you think will happen, you know, when global warming reaches a crisis point? That's going to be much more annoying for you. So civil disobedience is, according to the law, is the refusal to obey the demands or commands of a government or occupying power without resorting to violence or active measures of opposition. So again, it's all about that peaceful nature and that communication. So there's another film here, which it's a shame not to see it without the sound. So again, I'll try and send you a link, but you can see a little bit here about the disruption that was caused in Cardiff through their civil disobedience and through their marches. So they use a lot of placards, they use a lot of signs to get their message across. An Extinction Rebellion, and not just Welsh, this is something that happens all across the UK, but this is just an example here. So like they say, very few people are breaking the law. And it's just, yeah, ways that you can raise awareness. I won't make you watch it all silently, but I will send you through some links. So the last element I want to talk to you about is riot. And this is something that when you think about a march or that civil disobedience, there's quite a fine line where that can turn into riot. And some of you might have heard about riots on the news in more recent months. And this is a really tricky one because it's really important that you don't cross that line into breaking the law at any point. And the things that constitute breaking the law are violence of any kind, causing any kind of injury to anyone, making an enormous or disruptive amount of noise, and any type of threat. So whether that's threat to a building, you say, oh, if you don't do this, some people have been known to smash windows of buildings, start fires. It might be threatening to use weapons. It might be threats of any kind, even if they're not violent, by law constitute a riot. So you have to be so careful if you do decide to join a march or start a march of any kind that you are within your rights and within the law. Now, this image, some of you may have seen it before, is of the Merched Beca, which in English means Rebecca's women. And what I want to talk to you about here in terms of this word riot is about language. So in Wales, we talk about the Merched Beca with respect. And we talk about we celebrate their story. And the story is that when English landowners set toll houses on roads that were commonly used by the Welsh, particularly by Welsh farmers who didn't have much money, they were made to pay every time they went up or down a road. And some of these tolls were in between two fields of one farmer's land. So every time they crossed from one side to the other, they had to pay a fine. And this was extremely difficult for the poorer communities of Wales. So what happened was a group of farmers dressed up in their wives' clothing, and they went and they were threatening and they were loud, and they caused disruption with the toll houses, and they often broke down the gates and frightened the toll keepers. So, you know, when you think about this story, it's a story of two sides, and each country, Wales and England, are going to look at that story differently. This image comes from a newspaper, an English newspaper at the time, and they've drawn these people in a really grotesque manner. They've made the children look dirty. They've given them enormous weapons that are very unlikely to be the weapons that they were using. And the language that they use in England about this moment in history is the Rebecca riots. And riot is a word that we don't use to describe it. So it gives an instant negative overview to what's happening by using the word riot. And it's really important to think when you're talking about your cause, what language you're using, what language you think people are likely to use about you. And that will really make a difference to thinking about how likely people are to support you. So it's really important not to riot and to be really careful about that language. So that was our last question. We're going to jump into our last quiz question now before we just have a little recap. There was quite a lot of information there, so
there was. Let's have a look at the question then. How many signatures were there on the Welsh Women's Peace Petition in 1924? Now I'll let you look at the numbers because there are a lot of numbers for me to say out there. But what did Seren say? It was rather close to one big number, wasn't it, Seren?
it was.
How many signatures were there? Let's have a look. Yeah, well done. Nearly 400,000 names and signatures on that petition. Right. Let's see the podium then. Sophia in third place. Well done, Sophia. Alakabar in second. And coming out on top today, Neddy Bones. Well done, everyone. Da iawn chi.
Good job, guys. Well done. So, Siwan, do you think you might take any of those actions for your cause?
Well, possibly. I would need to have a chat with the pupils and the head teacher and the teachers and see what they think as well, and then move on with going for it and having the support of the school and the community.
That's it, absolutely. And that's the important thing. You know, you work with a group, you think through it together, you do your research, you get your support, and then your last stop is maybe to do something like make placards as a group and stand peacefully somewhere. So again, if you wanted a new crossing opposite your school, so even making placards with the children can be very effective. It's really important to remember how powerful your voices are as young people. And you know, if there's an email going around saying, oh, children's safety, we should have a crossing, people might ignore it. But if they see a child's writing, a child's drawing saying we don't feel safe at school, it has a lot more power. So don't underestimate yourselves and what you can achieve. So I don't know if you want to write these down in class or have a think about it, but we'll just recap on that action plan. So to make your action plan, you need to think about what you want to achieve, who can help or support you, how are you going to communicate your aims, and what actions are you going to take. And I really hope that you enjoy thinking this through and that you've maybe learned some things about the history of Wales and also about what you can and can't do if in your lives you ever come across a cause that makes you feel really passionate.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Seren. I will share the links and some information with the teachers after the session. But thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Seren, for an informative session, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Ta-ra.
Bye.